Day one in my new home, I was unpacking boxes, excited for peace and freedom, when suddenly, a woman I'd never met marched up, pointed at my lawn, and shouted that I had to leave immediately. The craziest part? She had zero authority over me. The day I moved into my new home felt like a dream I had been chasing for years finally coming true. For so long, I had wanted a place that wasn't just four walls and a roof, but a sanctuary. A space where I could breathe, where I wouldn't have to live under constant rules or feel like someone was always watching over my shoulder. I had toured countless houses, sat through endless negotiations, and nearly gave up at one point. But then I found it, the perfect home. Not only was it beautiful, with its wide porch and a yard that practically begged for Sunday barbecues, but it was also outside the jurisdiction of the HOA. That detail, that one little fact, made me feel like I had just won the lottery. The moving day itself was filled with the usual chaos of boxes everywhere, tape stuck to my hands, and the smell of fresh paint still lingering in the hallways. I remember carrying the very first box into the living room, setting it down, and pausing just to take it all in. Sunlight streamed through the big windows, casting golden patterns on the floor, and I thought, this is it. This is my space. Finally. There was a quietness in that moment, almost like the house itself was welcoming me. Neighbors were walking their dogs, kids were riding bikes, and everything looked like a perfect picture of suburban calm. A few friendly waves came my way, and it gave me this comforting sense that I had picked the right community. No drama, no nosy neighbors, no one trying to control how I lived. I imagined sitting out on the porch with a coffee in hand, watching the seasons change, maybe even planting a small garden by the side of the house. Freedom had never felt so close. Every move I made that day carried a sense of triumph. Setting up the couch wasn't just about furniture, it was about reclaiming my independence. Plugging in the coffee maker wasn't just convenience, it was about building a life on my terms. I didn't have to worry about whether the curtains were the approved color or if the trash bin was placed at an exact angle. There were no ridiculous HOA rules here. This home was mine, truly mine, and I felt unstoppable. I remember laughing to myself as I unpacked kitchen plates, thinking how much of a nightmare I'd heard HOA communities could be. Endless stories of homeowners being fined for having the wrong shade of grass or being told they couldn't park in their own driveway. I felt lucky, almost smug, knowing I had dodged that bullet. My only concern that day was whether I could get the Wi-Fi running before bedtime. That's how perfect things felt. What I didn't know was that this calm, this sweet sense of relief, was about to be shattered. Because just as I was starting to believe I had stepped into the peaceful life I always wanted, the storm was already walking down the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, ready to knock on my door. I was still unloading boxes when I noticed a shadow stretching across my driveway. At first, I thought it was just another neighbor coming by to say hello, maybe even offer a hand. But the sound of sharp heels clicking against the pavement and the sight of a clipboard clutched tightly under one arm quickly erased that thought. She wasn't here to welcome me. She was here on a mission. She stopped right at the edge of my lawn, planted her feet firmly, and adjusted her oversized sunglasses. Even though I couldn't see her eyes, I could feel them scanning me up and down, judging everything, the moving truck, the half-open boxes, even the color of my front door. The air shifted immediately. 1 second I was humming to myself while carrying a lamp inside, and the next, it felt like I was standing trial. "You've made a very big mistake," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the afternoon quiet. No hello, no neighborly smile, just those 6 words that dropped like a hammer. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. "Excuse me?" I asked, setting the lamp down slowly, almost as if I didn't want to provoke her. "You bought this house," she declared, waving the clipboard as if it were a royal decree. "And now you'll have to follow the rules." "The rules?" I repeated, genuinely confused. I hadn't signed up for any rules. In fact, avoiding rules was the exact reason I chose this house in the first place. "Yes, the HOA rules," she snapped, stepping closer as if closing in on her prey. "This entire neighborhood falls under the Homeowners Association. That means your yard, your trash, your mailbox, all of it has to meet our standards. And if you don't comply, you'll be fined. Or worse." I could feel the corners of my mouth twitch, wanting to laugh at the absurdity of it. But something in her posture told me she wasn't joking. She believed every word. Actually, I said carefully, this house isn't in the HOA. I checked before I bought it. That should have ended the conversation. But instead, it lit a fire in her. She took off her sunglasses dramatically, revealing eyes that burned with outrage. Impossible, she shouted, loud enough for a couple of neighbors across the street to turn their heads. If you live here, you live under my rules. That's how it works. My stomach tightened, not from fear, but from disbelief. Who was this woman, and why did she think she had authority over me? It was like watching someone play a part in a movie they'd written for themselves. By now, the peaceful neighborhood scene had changed. A man walking his dog stopped to watch. A kid on a bike slowed down, circling curiously. People were beginning to notice that the new homeowner had already become the center of a showdown, and it was only day one. And as Karen's voice grew louder, one thought echoed in my head, so much for my peaceful move-in. Her voice was already echoing down the street, and by this point, I felt like I was standing in the middle of some bizarre stage play. Neighbors had slowed their walks, kids had stopped pedaling their bikes, and even the breeze seemed to pause just to listen. I kept thinking, surely she'll calm down once I explain again. Surely this is a misunderstanding. But no, Karen wasn't here to listen. She was here to command. She jabbed her clipboard toward my lawn like it was a weapon. This grass is already too long, she barked. You'll need to cut it immediately. And that fence wrong color. Our approved shades are beige, light brown, or sandstone. You'll have to repaint within the week. I almost laughed, but she wasn't done. Her voice grew sharper, her demands more absurd with each passing second. Your trash bins must be placed at the curb no earlier than 7 a.m. on collection day and removed by 6 p.m. sharp. Any violation will result in fines. And as for your mailbox, black isn't allowed. It must be white. You'll have to replace it. I stood there, blinking in disbelief. She was rattling off an entire list of violations for a house I hadn't even finished unpacking. And the kicker? None of it applied to me. Again, I said slowly, trying to hold on to my patience, this home is not in the HOA. I made sure of it before I signed. You don't have the authority to enforce any of this on me. Her eyes narrowed, and her lips curled into a smirk that sent a chill down my spine. Oh, I have all the authority I need, she hissed. Everyone in this neighborhood answers to me. And if you think you're going to waltz in here and do whatever you please, you're in for a rude awakening. Either you comply with our rules, or you'll regret moving here. It was such a surreal moment, hearing those words. It didn't feel like real life, it felt like a movie villain delivering her big threat. Only, this wasn't a performance. She meant it. Every exaggerated syllable was soaked in entitlement. By now, one of the neighbors across the street couldn't hold back. He chuckled, shaking his head. Karen, that house isn't under the HOA, he called out. You're wasting your breath. But she spun around on him like a hawk circling its prey. Stay out of this, she shouted. Then she turned back to me, eyes blazing. Don't listen to him. You will follow the rules. I'll make sure of it. And just like that, she stormed off, heels clacking, muttering under her breath. The crowd of curious neighbors slowly dispersed, whispering to each other, glancing back at me as if to say, welcome to the neighborhood, you're in for a ride. I stood there on my porch, stunned. All I had wanted was a quiet day, unpacking and settling in. Instead, within hours of moving in, I'd been threatened, judged, and essentially told I didn't belong. And though I didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of her crusade. The next morning, I stepped outside to grab my coffee and was greeted by an envelope sticking awkwardly out of my mailbox. At first glance, it looked official, bold lettering across the front, stamped in red, and tucked inside a plastic sleeve as if it had come straight from an office. For a split second, I thought maybe the previous homeowner had forgotten to change an address, or it was just routine mail. But when I pulled it out and unfolded the papers, my jaw nearly hit the ground. It was a notice, an HOA violation notice. According to this document, I was already in violation of several community rules. My grass was unacceptable. My trash bins were improperly stored. My fence color was non-compliant. And, of course, there was a demand to pay HOA fees immediately, with a fine threatened if I didn't. The kicker? The letterhead wasn't even real. It was a sloppy logo at the top, slightly crooked, and the formatting looked like it had been typed up in Microsoft Word by someone in a hurry. I didn't need a detective to tell me who had slipped it into my mailbox. This had Karen written all over it. I actually laughed out loud, standing there in my driveway. The audacity was almost impressive. She wasn't just trying to intimidate me face to face, she was trying to make it look like the HOA itself had come after me. But instead of confronting her directly, I decided to play it smart. I tucked the fake notice under my arm, walked back inside, and scanned it into my computer. Then I forwarded the entire thing to my lawyer, along with the official documents proving my house was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. If Karen wanted a fight, I was going to let her pick it with the real authorities. The next couple of days felt oddly quiet, almost as if she was waiting for me to come crawling over with an apology or, better yet, a check for the fake fines she'd made up. But I stayed calm, carried on unpacking, and let her wonder. And then the hammer dropped, not on me, but on her. The HOA themselves sent her a formal letter. They confirmed in no uncertain terms that my house was not, and never had been, under their authority. They went even further, instructing her to stop harassing me immediately or face consequences of her own. When I opened my door later that afternoon, she was already waiting at the edge of her lawn, as if she could sense what had happened. I held up the letter with a smile, not saying a word. She snatched at the air like she wanted to rip it out of my hand, but I pulled it back, letting her see the official seal and the bold print that essentially said, "You have no power here." Her face twisted, the color draining and then flushing red again. She muttered something under her breath, spun on her heel, and stormed back toward her house without another word. And in that moment, I realized the battle wasn't over, but I had already won the war. The letter from the HOA had landed exactly as I hoped, and honestly, it was better than anything I could have scripted. It was official, it was direct, and most importantly, it told Karen in writing that she had absolutely no authority over me or my property. For once, she had been silenced not by my words, but by the very organization she tried to hide behind. The next few days, I noticed a change. Karen still lingered around, still peered through her blinds when I walked outside, but the boldness was gone. No more marching across the lawn. No more barking orders. It was as if the HOA's letter had clipped her wings. One morning, I brewed a fresh cup of coffee and carried it out onto the porch. The air was crisp, sunlight painted the street in gold, and for the first time since moving in, I felt like I could finally breathe. I sat down, leaned back in my chair, and let the steam rise from my mug. It was the exact moment I had dreamed of when I first signed the papers for this house. Peace. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her car rolling slowly down the street. Normally, she would have pulled over, rolled down her window, and launched into another lecture. But this time was different. She glanced in my direction, saw me sipping coffee with the HOA letter folded neatly on the table beside me, and in an instant, her window slid up. She sped away, as if even the sight of me was too much to handle. I couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't cruel laughter, it was the kind that comes when you realize you've finally beaten something that seemed endless. She had tried every trick in the book: intimidation, fake authority, even forged paperwork. And all of it had blown up in her face. The best part? The neighbors had seen it all. From her first outburst to the ridiculous notice to her public humiliation, the community knew exactly who she was and what she had tried to pull. More than once, a passerby would give me a knowing smile, or a quiet, "Glad you stood your ground." It wasn't just my victory, it felt like everyone else had gotten some peace, too. As I sat there finishing my coffee, I realized something funny. I had moved here for freedom, for the chance to live without restrictions. And in a twisted way, Karen had given me proof of exactly why that mattered. She was the embodiment of everything I had wanted to escape: the endless control, the obsession with power, the constant interference. And now, she couldn't touch me. I leaned back, let the sun warm my face, and thought, freedom has never tasted this sweet. It was more than just owning a house. It was owning my life, my choices, my peace. And no clipboard, no sunglasses, no self-appointed neighborhood queen was ever going to take that away again.